Howdy, howdy. We are live on a Friday night, and this is our second week in a row where I guess we are taking a break from covering Star Trek to instead cover Star Trek adjacent media. I say that a lot, Star Trek adjacent.
Yeah.
It's a big
Well,
umbrella
that's because we've
term.
been covering it lately. It's
That's fair.
But yeah, we had some Black Mirror last week, so it's a little dark. Enjoyable, but we thought it might be fun to wash that down with some fun, delightful action adventure comedy like Galaxy Quest for dessert.
it's a loving homage to Trek and not a biting,
Yeah.
acidic satire of it.
Yeah,
Definitely a nicer look at the idea of fans of Star Trek.
absolutely.
than-
And I'm looking forward to digging into it with you, Rachel. So we can.
Yeah, Rachel. I think we mentioned this last week or in previous weeks, but Rachel joined us when we caught this recently at the Alamo Draft House, where it was planned for one night or a weekend.
yeah, I think it was a week. If I remember correctly, the theme of the month was they were doing 90s movies.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
it was actually might have been 1999 movies.
I like it might have been very
specifically.
specific.
Yeah.
And I was like scrolling through it and I was like, wait, we're all nerds. I bet we all want to go see Galaxy Quest.
Hell yeah!
But yeah, there's a lot to unpack, so let's just go ahead and get the show started. I'm Fatheree,
This is Dave.
I'm Rachel.
and this is Tex-Trek.
Engage.
Welcome back aboard the Starship Texas for the 274th installment of the Tex-Trek podcast. I like 274th because it's 47 backwards and then a 2 thrown in thereafter, I guess. But
It fits that this is a flip side of Star Trek,
I suppose
Yeah.
so.
not a mirror universe, but a flip.
But welcome back to the Tex-Trek podcast, the home of Star Trek fandom from deep in the heart of Texas, where we take a deep look at Star Trek old and new. And tonight we are talking about the 1999 film Galaxy Quest, written by David Howard and Robert Gordon, and directed by Dean Paraso. It's a silent T on the end. Don't say Parasot, y'all. That's wrong. That's incorrect.
I'll see what I can do.
Yeah,
This is like an honorary. It's like an honorary Star Trek movie. People
Yeah.
frequently mention it when you have like somebody says, "Oh, what are your favorite Trek? What's your order of your favorite
The
Trek
famous
movies?"
one, the famous example was, I guess it 2016 at Vegas, but one year back when Creation was still doing it as like an official convention, they voted on the top ranking of the Star Trek films, and Galaxy Quest was ranked number 1.
Yeah, you don't want to allow write-in votes on that one if you don't want to be slightly embarrassed.
It's
But-
like often when you do votes on the different adaptations of Emma, Clueless always wins.
That's a very good comparison. But I think that probably most most Jane Austen fans aren't particularly offended by that. Just as I don't
No.
think most Star Trek fans are offended by Galaxy Quest being
No,
allowed
I
to
think-
hang out in our room.
I think there's a special because everyone I feel like, well, not now because people know Galaxy Quest, but I feel like there was definitely a thing where people went in being like, "This is gonna make fun of us," and we're like, "Oh no, we're in on the joke." Like,
Yeah,
like,
totally.
We come
I mean,
off well.
that's kind of what I thought. I'm sure we'll talk a little bit more about it when we do our I don't know how we're gonna structure that, Father. If we're gonna talk about our initial reactions or whatever, but
I mean,
I know you've got a layout, so
I give you an outline every week with the structure, but
we break the structure a little bit. But I know we've got other stuff to talk about first. We got some business and stuff.
Yes.
Well, just first of all, we do need to thank the Tex-Trek Patreon supporters. We do appreciate the monthly contributions. It goes a long way to helping us continue to do the weekly live show. So thank you so much. Starfleet Sohel, Cake is Eternal, Crazy Dutchie, Joanne Robertson, John Dog, Geek Filter, Earl Grey Trekkie, Quarks Bar, Stephanie Durantes, Braxton, Chuck A, and our anonymous supporters. We do like to celebrate each month with a monthly Patreon watch party. So our next one will be February 17th. And whatever tier you're able to help out in the Patreon, it will get you into the watch party. You can come in as little as $2 a month. And we're going to be watching a Valentine's Day themed episode, a Voyager one. We're going to watch Someone to Watch Over Me, I think is the name of it. I should double check at some point. I keep assuming my memory is getting it right, but I'm pretty sure that's the name of it. But as Sohel pointed out last week, it's the one where they sing "You Are My Sunshine." It's the Doctor teaching Seven of Nine giving her lessons and how to date. Basically,
it's a very sweet episode.
It is. It's really good.
It'll be a new one to me. I may watch it ahead of time so that I can take it in on its own and then have our conversational look at it.
Yeah, because when we do the watch parties, anyone in attendance, anyone in the Patreon, anyone can unmute and join in the conversation. We have a big, fun, collective Tex-Trek commentary over the episode. Or if you're shy, or if you don't feel like talking, you can type in the chat. We have a text chat going as we're watching this, so it tends to be a fun crowd. So that'll be Saturday, February 17th. And there was, we got a date. Speaking of dates, we have a date for the Discovery premiere at South by. Well, I think we now know it'll be on that Monday, right? I think that's March 8th.
Sounds right for South by.
But yeah, here in Austin, so that's cool. Or no, that's on the. That's the. I think it might be the 11th.
What's funny is I've had a couple people who don't understand how expensive South by is. Like, oh, you're gonna try and go, and I was like, I don't think you understand.
It's gonna even people who have the pass. It's gonna be unless you have the silver one. It's gonna be hard to.
Yeah.
I think that's gonna be mainly press people or whoever if they allow Paramount to bring in X number of people. But I don't. I'm will look into possibly attending. We'll see. But what's more exciting, I think, for most people is the premiere of the show dropping on Paramount Plus April 4th.
Yeah, that is probably when most of us will get around to it. April 4th, huh? Okay.
We'll be covering that on Tex-Trek every week, and we'll bring back the other Thursday night first reaction streams as well. So
yeah, looking forward to getting back to that. It's fun because I haven't got to do that with Discovery yet, obviously.
Oh yeah, that'll be cool. And this is going to be a kind of a heartfelt final season for, as we've talked about before, because Discovery was kind of what prompted Tex-Trek to form up. So we'll go on one last ride with this crew.
Yeah, and we'll be doing some stuff kind of leading up to the premiere of the final season in March. Sure that you are following Tex-Trek, that you're subscribed, that you can subscribe to the YouTube channel, you can rate the podcast, you can do both. That will really help us out. Oh, I want to thank people. I was saying last week how I really wanted some people to give us some 5-star reviews on Spotify and get us. We were at 4.2, and I feel like we should never be below 4.7. It should always be above 4.7. And after I said that, it got bumped up to 4.3. So it's kind of a good news, bad news. It's the bad news is it's still not at 4.7, but the good news is it has moved. So maybe if I reiterate how important that is to me, it would just mean the world to me if we got that above a 4.7 on Spotify. If anyone listening or watching me right now, if you could open Spotify on your mobile device, look up Tex-Trek and give it that 5-star rating, I would really appreciate it. Then next week I can be like, look, it moved up again. So let's keep that trend going.
Yeah, I like it.
And with the subscriptions, I think it'd be fun if we hit 1701 on YouTube this year. So,
by the way, Fatheree, that slow upward tick will be like in Enterprise when they're getting up to warp 5 stars. Where we'll be we're at 4.3, 4.4.
No. That's why it stops at 5, because if we went over that, the reactor would explode. And we don't want that, so don't stress out Trip Tucker. But we'll get it up above 4.7. Maybe we'll get it all the way up to a perfect 5 someday. But that's the goal.
We'll have to take out some enemies first, Romulan style.
Well, or just take the Tim Allen approach to dealing with Sarah. So, just fire everything. That'll take care of old lobster heads. To be fair, it almost worked, but yeah, I guess we should talk about this movie.
Yeah.
Were you saying, Rachel?
No, I was like, to be fair, that's probably what I would do too. I was like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like,
it's not like they gave him a lot of parameters or instructions.
Like, you're trying to play Street Fighter on the arcade machine. Like, you're not gonna like look up all how to do all the combos, right? If you don't know what you're doing, you're just gonna I'm just gonna hit everything. Why not?
As someone who's an avid button smasher, like
unapologetically, yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it works. Sometimes you win that way.
Yeah. So
that's true, and it's cheap, but it's also what I do.
The problem is switching between different systems. Is half the time I'm like, half the time I'm button smashing to be like, which button is up on the system? I don't know.
Right.
Well, Galaxy Quest, the story of this movie, how it got started, it's kind of interesting. I didn't really know a ton of the behind the scenes until lately, but I kind of just poked around just to see the kind of the surface level stuff. I didn't dig in too deep, but I guess the genesis of Galaxy Quest, it was originally thought up by the writer David Howard had the idea, and he sold it, and it got changed a little bit, but kind of the basic idea of like this sci-fi TV show got like really popular with these aliens and shenanigans ensue. But there's also like a... What were you saying, Rachel?
Oh, I was going to say, I rewatched the documentary Never Surrender, so I was like, I might just have some weird fun facts that I picked up.
Yeah, you should explain, like, people who don't know that, because it's kind of a unique documentary, but...
Yeah, it's called Never Surrender. It's about, like, the making of Galaxy Quest and, like, how it became, like, a cult classic. And it's done by Screen Junkies, which is the company that owns, like, honest trailers and like fandom, like the wiki website.
Yeah.
And so it's clearly done by people who appreciate fan culture. So it's a loving homage to something that was like a loving homage to fans.
Nice. So in that it reflects Galaxy Quest itself.
Yeah. And yeah, there's some really fun behind the scenes. They have a lot of the behind the scenes people and most of the actors or like even like I was like a little surprised they got Rainn Wilson to come talk about it, considering how little Rainn Wilson's in the movie.
Oh yeah, he's one of the Thermians.
Yeah,
and I believe
he's just like
they mentioned is apparently his role was supposed to be bigger, and then he got like a pilot. And so
he's gone on to do okay for himself, I guess.
I think Rainn Wilson is fine.
Yeah, one of the top 5 biggest careers in this movie, probably.
Yeah,
but
the cast, it's an amazing cast. Like even like a lot of actors. Like I don't think Sam Rockwell was like a huge name when he did this movie either.
No, yeah, this and The Green Mile both came out in '99, and that was, I guess, like both were kind of breakout roles for him.
An amazing.
I guess Tim Allen,
like looking
Tim
at
Allen
his career after.
And Alan Rickman were kind of the anchors.
And Sigourney Weaver.
And Sigourney Weaver.
Alan Rickman really, like, the only thing I really knew him from was like Die Hard, and then like he showed up as like a bad guy in a bunch of movies after that.
Yeah, because this is someone who was genuinely obsessed with Alan Rickman in high school. I was a weird child. I don't know. Alan Rickman's first movie is Die Hard. He didn't get famous till later in life.
Yeah, and then he was just always like a British bad guy in everything, except he did play an Irishman in Michael Collins, but he was like a bad guy in that. He was he was like on the side of the British in the one time he didn't play a British character.
Speaking of Austin characters, to be fair, he's German in Die Hard.
That's true. Yeah,
he is like one of the love interests in Sense and Sensibility, but it's very. I think they talked about it. It's definitely not comedies before this. Like it's very serious, doing Shakespearean stuff. It like a little bit reminds me of like Patrick Stewart's career.
Interesting.
Of,
okay.
Like very serious, and then all of a sudden he gets this like, huge thing. in my case, Die Hard, not like, and then later on in life, even bigger things. But
just out of curiosity, like just basic reactions, like did first of all, you were too young to see it at the theater, Rachel? Is that right?
yeah, yes, I saw it.
You're like a wee baby.
I was already obsessed with Alan Rickman when I watched
That's who they were marketing it to. It's funny because that's actually the part of the problem was that the movie was marketed to children, and they wanted to make it like a very like safe family movie.
To what they were marketing for, I think I was still even too young. 99. I was born in 93, so in 99 I would have only been like 7.
Yeah, I mean, you could have theoretically seen it, but yeah, it was probably a little more of a 10 or 12 and up. Fatheree, did you see it in the theater?
I did not see it in the theater, but I saw it shortly after. I rented the VHS when it came out. It was one of the.
I'm also not remembering. I was living overseas in '99, so that also could have had a factor in this.
Right.
I would have saw it in 2000 because it was a Christmas release. It was in December. A friend of mine was just reminding me the theater that I went to a lot in Pflugerville, Texas, Tinseltown. It had a big rock monster diorama set up in the lobby when this movie was out. But I saw it on VHS, and I really liked it at the time. But it wasn't a movie that I ever like watched and rewatched over and over again. And I saw it in the theater in, I think it was 2016, I guess, was when Alan Rickman passed away. But they did like a screening at our Alamo Drafthouse chain. It used to be like a cool local Austin thing. I know it's like a big corporate nationwide chain now, but that is where we saw this one. It was at the Drafthouse that Leonard Nimoy peed on at the premiere of Star Trek 09, but not the actual building because it's been.
By the way, look it up because that's Fatheree. When you say that, it makes it sound like he did something really harsh and terrible when it was actually kind of weirdly a generous thing to do.
But sorry, I lost my train of thought. Go ahead, Rachel.
Oh, I was gonna say, I think I saw this at the right age. Like I was obsessed with Alan Rickman, and then also obviously really into Star Trek. But like I feel like high school is like a good age for this movie. It's like you're old and like young enough for it to like make an impression on you, but old enough to like get most of the jokes.
So I saw it. I saw it again at that screening that I just mentioned in 2016, I think. And I was like really impressed with it. I was like, man, this movie holds up so well. Like I was really like surprised at the quality of it. I'd kind of just like forgotten. And you know, seeing it as like an adult was kind of different than like seeing it as a teenager. And I'm sure there's a lot more I was able to appreciate. And then I really didn't see it again after that until just like a couple of weeks ago when we three saw it as a group. And then like this week I've watched it 4 times. It's more than like I've ever seen it. But going forward, I think I do like appreciate this movie more just as it is just kind of like a rare special thing, just because that's kind of how it's just existed in my life. It's not like, you know, Ghostbusters where by the time I turned 7, I had the entire movie, you know, memorized inside and out. I knew like every scene. So instead of that
it's funny
type
you
of
mentioned
relationship,
Ghostbusters because Harold Ramis almost directed this.
And I'm sure that's why I was like making the connection. But you know what's funny is that Harold Ramis left because he didn't want to work with Tim Allen. And DreamWorks is like, no, you have to do this movie with Tim Allen, and Harold Ramis didn't want to. And to be fair with Harold Ramis, you know, a lot of people say Tim Allen's an asshole. I know other people say like nice things about him, but a lot of people don't like him, and they didn't probably have like a lot of confidence in or some people probably didn't have like a lot of confidence in Tim Allen because he's just kind of like this funny sitcom TV guy. Like, could he actually carry a movie that had like a little bit of like, you know, budget and effort behind it like Harold Ramis wanted to do? But Tim Allen, however you feel about him, I think he knocks it out the park in this movie. This is like
he is
just such perfect casting.
That's just what
like a great role for
Boat
him.
Wreck in our audience just said. A jerk, perfect casting. What were you saying, Rachel?
Oh no, Tim Allen's perfect. No, there were stories about in the documentary that like they like didn't not get along, but it was like very clear that Alan Rickman and Tim Allen's processes were very different. Apparently.
Yeah. Alan Rickman
like their characters.
He was like cold and standoffish, and people don't know if is he just being kind of a method actor and being like this cranky actor, or is he just like actually like that?
I think he's like that, right?
it's like a little bit. He's like that, and then a little. I think he's just a little more reserved. And then I've always heard like when you would get to know him, you'd be like, oh, he's actually really nice, but you've got to like get through a wall to get to that.
Mm-hmm. But outside of Alan Rickman, it sounded like everyone had like a lot of fun working on this movie, and Tim Allen was kind of real funny on set. He's always like keeping the mood light and keeping people laughing, and spirits were pretty high.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's good. I want it to be a fun shoot. I want it to embody some of what the movie shows.
They sounded like they had a lot of faith in it. They're like, man, we're doing something like really good. Like this isn't gonna be like some dumb kid movie. This can be the next Ghostbusters. Like.
Apparently, there's something they said they got very little supervision while filming because the studio was also making Gladiator at the time, and was just paying way more attention to Gladiator.
Yeah, this one was kind of a under the radar sort of thing. I remember I saw it at the theater at the time, but had not planned on it originally. I think, if my memory serves, I think it started getting a little bit of buzz in sort of geek community websites as being kind of legit. And then I was like, you know what? If only to see like kind of good, cool 1999 special effects handle something very much like Star Trek, I'll give it a shot. Mm-hmm. I ended up, it was one of those really great surprises, when you go to the theater and your expectations are low or moderate and you end up being like coming out on a real high. That was what this was for me.
I think you muted yourself, Fatheree.
Sorry, but that was a lot of people's experience, Dave. It was like the word of mouth because the movie like opened with like a $12 million weekend or something like that, and then like the next weekend it made like another 12 million, and then like the next weekend it made like another like it never went down. It just people kept coming to it, and that's a sign that you didn't market the movie well enough. But the word of mouth is carrying it.
In the documentary, there was I don't remember who said like some people who worked in the business came and they turned around and like recognized people who worked on it. They're like, wait, this is good. Why was it like marketed so weirdly?
Yeah, it was because like, Rugrats made a lot of money and DreamWorks is like, oh, Rugrats made a lot of money, so we want to make that money, so we're gonna make this for kids. We're gonna make Sigourney say screw that instead of fuck that.
Well, apparently, according to the documentary, there's like a lot that's just the one instance that we can tell that happened, that they cut a lot of cussing out because it was originally supposed to be PG-13.
Do y'all agree that I think it probably was to its benefit to go a little bit more family friendly and cut that?
I don't.
No, I think I think it makes them that kind of ages poorly. It's like no one says screw that. Like you would say the F word. It would still be like a PG-13 movie. Like in this day and age when like Marvel MCU movies can drop F-bombs, it's like like we're like.
See, I don't think it would add that much. Like I would have laughed a little bit harder, but I kind of recognize that there's some stuff that's meant to be like something you can watch with like even like an 8 or 9-year-old or something.
The thing is, because I think know that wasn't the movie they were intending to make, I would be really interested to see that cut.
Sure.
Just to see, like, well, like, one I know, I don't think they mentioned this in the documentary that I just watched, but now that you have Tony Saliba, I've heard, like, apparently they didn't mention this, so maybe this isn't true, but I have heard this before, that there's a deleted scene where he, like, smokes a joint, and that's why he's acting so weird the entire movie.
Yeah, I assumed that's one of my what was one of my big complaints with the movie as a kid is I didn't like Fred Kwan. I was like, why is this guy like so weird? I didn't understand like what's his deal? He's just dumb and weird and friendly. And
he's super low key.
I've met enough like burnt out boomer stoners they just at some point in their life they had a midlife crisis and broke down, but then recovered from it and just became like very zen and just learned how to detach from everything in life that was causing them misery and just be totally like at peace. It's like, oh yeah, I know exactly what this guy's personality type now.
It's because I also like when the time I watched this, I watched Monk regularly, so like I was Tony Shalhoub was just like so different from Monk, and I was like, oh, he's very. It was probably the thing that made me go like, oh, he's like. He's a very good actor because this is so different from what I usually see him doing.
Yeah, I never watched Monk. What was his personality on that?
Well, he is has extreme OCD.
OCD, right?
And he's like just very particular, and very like, God, I'm trying to think of like how to say it without like coming off rude about like, it's like. And a lot of things are like very matter of fact, and he's like very. I guess I trying to think. I'm having a hard time describing Monk. Like Monk, it's a very.
I know we don't want to accidentally be ableist or anything like that,
that's
but
exactly what I'm running.
Is he sort of high strung, demanding, or
like high like his like he has like an assistant. Well, he has 2 different assistants throughout the show, but like they have to like carry around wipes for him. Like that's how.
Yeah.
And like it's very funny, and
that's pretty different from Fred Kwan.
Yeah, and he's very funny, and it's like one of those things that I don't. It's like Tony Shalhoub playing him. You're like, you're like, if it was any other actor, I do not think that show would have lasted as long as it did, because like you would get annoyed with him. But like Tony Shalhoub is just charming enough to like make it work.
It turns out they had like a pretty perfect cast in this.
Yeah.
Like you said, Sam Rockwell when he was just kind of getting rolling. And, the big names to anchor it. But even Justin Long as the Uber nerd.
Oh, yeah. Who apparently is like 20. I was shocked when I learned he was not like actually a teenager in this, when he made this.
Yeah. He's got the perpetually youthful look. I think I read somewhere he based his character part on comic book guy from The Simpsons. And
Marty McFly, which was a really, I thought, good idea. I was like, oh, that makes sense. That's but now that I know that, when I watch this movie, like pretty much like every line delivery he does is like, that's probably exactly how I would have done it, trying to marry together Marty McFly and the Simpsons comic book guy. But that's part of the, I think the charm of this movie is that there is so much relatability to it. So much of it rings true, like as far as like the convention atmosphere or just like those types of dynamics, like the relationships between fandom and celebrity, and almost kind of specifically to Star Trek. I think it's carried over to other franchises at this day and age, but there
definitely.
really was like something very unique and specific to Star Trek fandom that kind of invented modern fandom, that like we wouldn't have like anime convention culture wouldn't exist if it wasn't for like stuff like the Trekkies were doing in the 70s.
Oh yeah, definitely. And it's like, I would say you're a good example was like, look at the creation website and see like all of the different fandoms they have like conventions for.
Oh yeah, it's pretty wild. Trek, but they do show this side of, there's a little bit of, sometimes the fans are made to look a little goofy or pathetic in this. And then, you might even be thinking that as a viewer, but then there's a scene early on that's one of like the more serious scenes after kind of a lot of comedy, when Jason is in the bathroom and he overhears the 2 guys who are kind of just at the convention to laugh at people. Yeah. And they're talking about, how he's a wash-up. And everybody there is a loser, and they don't know how, but like they don't know how much the rest of the crew hates him, and I feel like it's the first sort of really serious scene in the movie that kind of anchors it, and you kind of see that this movie is gonna like, even though it's kind of poking a little bit of fun at fandom here and there, is also definitely not on the side of people who make fun of fans.
Oh yeah, and
because those guys were jerks. They were assholes.
That is the other part that I think really dates the movie, is like Sigourney saying "screw that," and then these dudes, when they say the R word, which is just a slur that I think people wouldn't include in a movie.
But I
like
think
this. but it works out kind of well that like those are kind of like the dickheads who said that.
I would say, speaking of Clueless, like very nonchalantly, like Cher says that word in Clueless, and I would have him like, I was like, it's the 90s, like.
Right. It's kind of too bad when it hits a movie that's otherwise could be kind of timeless.
But like everyone said that word in 1990. I like some people were probably like enlightened enough not to, but most of us said like Mr. Rogers would have said that in 1999. That might be an exaggeration.
Even in other countries, is not as like not used as I've. Not recently now. This probably would have been closer to like 2018. I was in Australia, and someone like a friend of a friend like said that word, and I was just like genuinely shocked. Like,
but a lot of the stuff like in that opening like at the GalaxyCon convention, you know, like they get like the movie kind of does this neat format where it opens with a clip of that we learn is from the final episode. So it opens like an episode of Galaxy Quest, and we see it in all of its glory, and then we see the fans celebrating it, and then we're like, oh, so it's like this cheesy thing, but it's like beloved by all these people all these years later, and then we see the actors and kind of the not miserable state, but just kind of the less comfortable state that they exist in.
I love they make Alan Rickman wears that thing all the time.
Oh yeah. He has the rubber head glued to his scalp like the entire movie, like until like the very end. You get like a little peek of what's that's kind of like your reveal, you know, like you never see like the Phantom of the Opera like without his mask on until like the very end. You get some type of peek.
And I guess
that's kind of like that.
I guess for the plot of the movie, you have to, because if they brought him and he didn't have that on, the Thermians would be like, "What the hell?" Like,
right. So that's
a good point.
But yeah, that the scene you're talking about, Fatheree, where they're in like the green room or whatever, you get these quick introductions of all the characters as they're kind of sniping at Jason Nesmith, the Kirk analog, because he's late,
or the Shatner analog, I guess.
Yeah, the Shatner analog for sure. And everybody kind of gets you start to get a pretty quick, you know, painting of just who everybody is. You know, that Sigourney Weaver felt that she was the overlooked character who was kind of the eye candy with no real role. You know, that Alan Rickman was the Shakespearean actor who kind of felt it was beneath him.
He's kind of like Nimoy and Patrick Stewart combined.
Yeah,
like Sigourney's character, she's kind of like Nichelle Nichols and Grace Lee Whitney both. But there's so much that rings true, like, at that convention scene. Like, yeah, like, they add some, I don't know, like, some shorthands for the mainstream audience. Like, having the actors show up, like, in costume. Like, actors would be, like, offended if you asked them to do that for, like, conventions. They're like, no, I don't want to, like, I mean, like, I know there's, like, occasions when stuff like that happens, but, like, but for the most part, like, so much of this, like, it feels realistic. Like, when Tim Allen is signing autographs and he's just, you know, eating up the glory of, like, telling these stories to his fans. Like, I've seen actors in that situation at conventions. I've also seen actors that are like kind of like grumpy and cranky, and you know they're doing their job, but they're not having a good day at work. And he gets
you see both sides from the same person. When he's just been signing long enough, he blows up.
In situations, I've definitely been where it's like when someone's grumpy, the best thing is when you like say something to them and then they like actually like perk up, and I was like, I got them to not be grumpy for a second, like.
For sure. I think a lot of them, you know, they're just, what we see here is they get tired of, you know, the fans that ask, you know, either the same questions over and over, or who kind of, you know, think that they love the franchise as much as the fans do and expect them to kind of be invested in the lore, which is, you know, that's Justin Long's character. And he hits Jason Nesmith at the wrong time, and he blows up at him like a big old jerk.
That bathroom scene that you mentioned, Dave, when I don't know if I should call him Tim Allen or Jason Nesmith. If I say Nesmith, y'all know who I'm talking about. If I say Nesmith, okay, I'll say Nesmith.
I think the problem is every character in this is played by a famous actor whose name we know, and also with two character names you have to remember.
Yeah, so
right.
Tim Allen is Nesmith, Sigourney Weaver is Gwen DeMarco, Alan Rickman, Alexander Dane. So we'll try to stick with that. But when Nesmith is in the bathroom and he overhears the assholes, but they're talking about like, man, do you see all of these pathetic, washed up actors? They can't get any real acting jobs, so they're out here begging for autographs, and that's like that hurts him, and he's like crying in like the stall. He's like devastated by it. Like, I promise you that like the William Shatners out there, like all the, like these actors who go to conventions, like they've heard like that type of stuff. Like they've had like those cries in the bathroom stalls. Like
Yeah,
it just rings so true.
For sure. And yet it's like is that before he blows up at Justin
That's right.
Long?
Yeah, that's right before he yells at him.
It's what brings him down so much that he's like in that mental place that he does it. Yeah, there's that's some nice bit of writing there. We see why he. It's not just that it's been a long day. It's that somebody shot him down psychologically hard.
Yeah.
Yeah, and even though he's like the jerk who like shows up late and he's so like self-absorbed and doesn't even like understand how big of an asshole he is to everyone else, like we can still kind of empathize with. Okay, but it's still I can still understand like it would hurt your feelings to hear that, especially to someone like this guy who probably thinks really highly of himself.
And it's funny because like in actuality, and maybe this is more now than it was then, is like. If you have a loyal fan base from like a specific thing, they will follow you to anything that you will do. Like,
yeah, I'm sure that's only become more difficult. But I know that this movie rings true from the actor perspective because so many Star Trek actors, and I've also heard like Babylon 5 actors and people from other shows that are similar to the Trek franchise, but they say like, oh my god, I love the Galaxy Quest movie so much. Patrick Stewart famously talks about how like he didn't want to see this movie at first, and then Jonathan Frakes told him, Patrick, you have to see it. It is so good, and it's not like mean. It's not like attacking the fans. It's not attacking us, but just go see it. And he was like, oh, I loved it, and I think a lot of the scenes like when we have DeMarco and Dane talking to each other on the phone about Nesmith, their old coworker. I think that felt like, oh yeah, a lot of like castmates have these types of phone calls.
Oh, definitely. No, it's Brent Spiner's in the documentary. He's one thing. He was like, I wish we had done this. Like that would have been like.
The funny thing is that now Paramount owns this movie. It's part of like the Paramount Pictures library. But
Yeah.
I'm glad that it was like made like its own thing separately. It doesn't have any of like the Star Trek sound effects or anything like that would have been licensed. They had to make. Because there's really like some smart choices, like Thermians, for example, how they kind of have like that Romulan Vulcan haircut, but it's still like kind of like their own thing. But it's just kind of like that little like echo of like an actual Star Trek touchstone.
Yeah, Father, you were talking about the shorthands they used at the convention. There's a lot of shorthands for Trek conventions and tropes in this. And there's not like we actually see a lot of Star Trek aliens that are quite like this goofy. But
no, and they're
it gives them a lot of visual comedy by doing that. It was they were able to make use of like building the Thermians from the ground up.
Honestly, because of how funny it is, even though it does have like all this Trek shorthand, I've definitely shown this movie to people in my life who know little to know about Star Trek, and they just find it funny, and it's a good movie on its own, which I think makes it like helps it.
I showed this movie to the other day when we watched it in the Tex-Trek Discord a few nights ago. So that's another good reason people should join the Tex-Trek Discord, because sometimes I toss on stuff that I'm watching now. If anyone wants to watch the Super Bowl with me Sunday, we can enjoy the commercials or I don't know, Taylor Swift or whatever element of the Super Bowl will bring you there. But I'll be watching that Sunday. But I was also watching this with a friend who came over, and she was seeing it for the first time, and she loved the movie. She was like so impressed with it. She was like, I can't believe I've never seen this movie. It's so good.
But no, in the documentary, they should like whoever was like designing the ship say it was the first time lawyers were involved because they wanted to like. They very much did not want to get sued by Paramount.
Well.
But apparently on somewhere the ship, before the number says it says NTE, and apparently it stands for Not the Enterprise.
Yes.
Oh, that's hilarious.
Yeah, I love those. I love when the special effects people have those cheeky little inputs like that they don't actually like hurt anything. They don't actually like stand out if you don't know the in joke. The actual like part of the movie when it becomes like a science fiction movie, like when does it actually like give it away? The Thermians are kind of subtle, like their alien behavior.
I would love to show this movie to someone who doesn't know the plot, because by the time I watched the movie, I was told the basic summary, like they go to space, and I was like, okay, cool, that sounds fun.
Like, my dad has only seen the first 30 minutes of From Dusk Till Dawn, the Robert Rodriguez Quentin Tarantino movie. And, like, to this day, I think he thinks it's just a movie of, like, oh, he has, like, the Gecko brothers, or, like, these two criminal like escaped fugitives, and like they take like a family hostage, and they're going down to Mexico. I don't know what happens after that. Like he never got to the vampire stuff, but I think that's hilarious.
It reminds me, for a long time on Netflix, it was clear, and very much for Frasier was the one. It was clear whoever wrote the descriptions watched the first scene of each episode and tried to write the descriptions off there, and so some of them were just totally off. And I was like, "This is bizarre," and I would love to see someone do that with a bunch of movies.
Yeah, this would be one that would be you would get some weird descriptions if you did that. But the audience is kind of informed before Nesmith is, because they do show us the alien ship, Saris's ship. So it does confirm to us, like, no, he is actually in space. But I think they wait long enough. You know, they give us, like, the car getting beamed up and the dog barking at it before that. Like, they wait long enough that you kind of figure it out on your own before they confirm it for you.
Interestingly, apparently the car being beamed up was apparently a studio note, and they wanted you to think maybe it was a dream when Nesmith first goes up.
Oh, interesting.
Right, but I like the way I like how it turns out, because... And I think that might have been more of like a choice for making it more of a family movie, as they want the kids to be able to understand what's happening. But I think the way that the final product, how it's like actually edited, there's something I find satisfying about it.
I'm glad the dog barking is there, because it keeps the tone of a comedy as opposed to just like a shot of the car moving somewhere.
Oh yeah, alien abduction can be horrifying.
Right. It's a little bit of visual humor that adds something to it.
And I guess he just thinks that he's doing a fan film. He thinks that like someone's like arranged like some little fan film cameo, which some of the actors like did do, like Takei and Koenig and Tim Russ. A lot of them have done that.
It's Justin Long's friends are the people he's supposed to be meeting.
Okay,
right.
That they say something. That's why when he bumps into him, he's like, there seems to be a miscommunication.
Miscommunication. Yeah. Okay.
That's why he's. They are the people.
Yeah.
Right. And Tim, Nesmith says, like, oh, this is a better setup than they usually have at some point.
Yeah. Yeah, he was really impressed. Yeah, what a doofus. Could you picture, like, Shatner, like, doing all of this? Like, I can.
Yeah, and he's hungover a bit, too. Yeah. He's working through it. By the way, I want to give a shout-out. I forget who the actor was who plays Saris, but he's like so dripping with evil, such a skeevy bad guy,
Such a good villain.
That I love him, yeah.
The design is great, the creature effects, so there is some really good production value in this. It's at a time when, Steven Spielberg was like, people were investing heavily into DreamWorks. They were putting a lot of money into their movie, or a lot of effort, whatever. Like, they all looked good. Everything they were making around this time looked good.
I'm glad this movie was made when it was, and not a couple years later, because I feel like there would have been a lot more CGI.
Yes. The CG in this movie is used so perfectly. Yeah. It's not overused, it's not underused. This movie came out the same year as The Phantom Menace, and I think it ages so much better because it has... they only use CGI when it actually looks good.
I remember thinking as I watched it that... I'm like, yeah, I know it's a comedy, and there's it's mostly there's a lot of goofy stuff in it, but I was like, the Protector, their ship, and Saris' ship, I'm like, they look pretty badass. They look really good. It made me want to almost invest in that world, to see some sort of follow up, because it was just such a good looking stuff.
Yeah, and it was ILM who were doing all of the Star Wars and Star Trek movies at the time, so like they knew how to make it like, not look quite as good, but make it look in the same style, and and they knew like how to kind of cheat and like do like, here's the shots, they're gonna look like really great if we save the money for like this shot and stuff like that. But Rachel, we should talk about like the cool thing with the aspect ratio of the movie. If you see it in the theater, it changes when
the
Tim
aspect
Allen
ratio changes twice, because when the movie starts, it's in
4:3.
4:3, the square, and then it goes to. I don't remember any of these numbers. That's the problem.
4:3 is classic traditional television aspect ratio. So perfect for the TOS/TNG look.
Yeah.
Yeah, then it gets a little bit wider. I think it's wider again when Nesmith is about to be sent back to Earth. I guess when he realizes, like, oh, I'm not in some type of, like, grounded real life dramedy. I am in an epic science fiction movie, action adventure thing.
Like a more cinematic aspect ratio.
Yeah.
Right. And that's when he's like on the transporter pad, he sees like this,
This, like,
massive
space.
widescreen, clearly it's blocked off by a force field or whatever, but, he sees this vast, stretch of space, makes huge use of the widescreen look, it's a gorgeous shot of a ringed planet with multiple other planets in the background, and so, yeah, it's kind of, it functions in a weird way, like, or not a weird way, but like a deliberate way, like going from black and white Kansas to color, in Wizard of Oz.
Yeah, exactly. We're not exactly, but yeah, it's kind of like that same style, and also like tonally, we get a big shift when it cuts from his epic space action adventure to the rest of the cast. I guess they're at like the grand opening of like a circuit city.
Yeah, I remember looking. I was like, "Oh,
man.
this is rough. Like, this is what they're doing."
I think it's got one of the most memorable lines in it from poor Alan Rickman's character by Grabthar's hammer. What is savings? As they cut the ribbon on the news store.
That line, I was like, oh, that's why he hates the line. He was like,
the
line probably didn't mean something when he originally said it, and now it's this.
But they have to do the comedy thing. Like, they have to like do it like 3 times, then on the 3rd time it's different,
Yeah.
So they have to keep doing like the grab Thor's hammer so that you could have like the well, it's not even like used for a joke. It is at first when he's like, "Don't say it," when he's all mad like hearing the line, but then when he's able to like say it in his big moment later that I'm sure we'll talk about. But what I love about this moment in the film is that Nesmith, when he does get like this big like exciting thing in his life, he was so like depressed and miserable when he woke up hungover, feeling like a washed up nobody has been, and then he's all like excited and thrilled. It reminds me in real life of when Shatner went to space for real. He actually kind of like acted like he was all like enthused and excited and wanted to tell everyone about it.
Yeah, even though he had some slightly dark observations afterwards. I mean, they were kind of grounded in like, hey, we need to take care of our planet, but it was a little sad that he
have
was
like a midlife crisis of like 40 years later. Than, like, what
yes, a Twilight life crisis.
Yeah.
But this is something that one of the things I love most about the movie is that it does present us a pretty appealing fantasy, I think, of sort of how we wish Shatner could be. That he could be like Jason Nesmith and have a little bit more of a heart of gold, and when he sees that he's hurt someone, feel apologetic about it and not be a blowhard. And, we just, we want that because we've seen, like, the TNG cast and subsequent casts be more like that. And so it's a very appealing wish.
It's like if William Shatner acted just a little bit more like Kirk.
Just a little bit.
Like, it's funny. The one quote I've seen from an actor was William Shatner being like, "It's a good movie, but I don't get what Tim Allen was doing," and I was like, "Oh, buddy."
Oh man.
Like, I think as Aaron said, Shatner's just not self-aware enough to understand that. I'm like, this is you coming off better than you do in real life.
Oh yeah.
I think it's funny that so many actors do like love the movie though, and it is kind of meaner to actors than it is to the fans. They kind of
it definitely is.
Like when it shows them all like react negatively to Nesmith being like, "Oh, you won't believe me, they had a ship and everything," and they're like, "Oh my God, is this guy drunk? Is he making fun of us? What is he doing? Like, is he really like offering us to be a part of like this gig or whatever?" And then they're like, "Hey, we're all desperate for work. Do you think he's ever gonna like offer anything to us like ever again?" And then they all go like running after him. But it is like, yeah, like a lot of actors who were on like one big show, like they are kind of like desperate to get like their next big acting job. And
I like considering how acting works. Like, if you're not making money, then you're not getting insurance. So like.
Oh right, for sure.
And like. What I think why it works as well as it does is by punching more to the actors, they're punching more up than down. So it doesn't come off as like mean as it could if they were punching more down to the fans.
But it is kind of an industry, I guess, that is and I know that I say this as like an internet content creator that is not like that far away, but it's kind of an industry that's going to be full of people who crave attention. So I think it's like, oh, like they're talking about me in this movie, but like Hollywood really does love movies about Hollywood. Like anytime like they make a movie about movies, it wins a lot of awards. You know,
That's
like La La
funny.
Land, Hell Caesar, like all that stuff.
Recently had a friend who asked like, "Oh, why do you do like the podcast and like TikTok and stuff?" And they're like, "Is it for attention?" I was like, "Not like influencer attention, but like I was like, I like performing and like." I was like a little bit for attention, I guess. I don't want to get into that.
Yeah, we're just a very social species, and sometimes it manifests in this way of communication. But what did y'all think when the crew comes on board and we get to see like their reactions to being in a sci-fi movie? Which I guess it's more of like a '90s thing, but the idea of like scary alien abduction. But when they're like being, I guess I don't know what are the octopus things doing to them when they're.
I think. It looks like they're probing them. I'm pretty sure they're just making sure they didn't like accidentally pick up a disease.
Yeah, I mean more than
like
anything,
a medical tricorder. It's like a medical tricorder, right?
I think so. I think it's easy for us to be like, oh, these have good intentions because we see the Thermians how they actually are throughout the rest of the movie, and you're like, yeah, they're fine. Like,
but yeah, these characters do not know that. Yeah, and of course, it's just a great visual gag that we will find out that is their true form. These big Cthulhu-looking tentacle blobs. Paid off to amazingly in a love scene later on.
Yeah, or Missy Pyle earlier when her translator's broken and just screams.
Yeah.
Like,
but I guess you have like a bit of freedom in a comedy is that you can do like weird alien things and you don't have to worry about like, is this gonna look like stupid on screen? Because it's like, oh, we're making a comedy. We want it to look stupid. That'll make people laugh. So.
And this is where it was, I think, good that they were not having to work with the Trek license per se. They didn't have to worry that they'd be like, say making, Gorn or something look like that look corny. They could do their own thing.
Yeah, you don't want to like make fun of like the Magato or the Horda or whatever. We want to respect all those and treat it with. We're kind of like big crybabies, aren't we? We would all be like whining if they.
Also, seeing their true form makes it make sense why they're like the aliens' other form is humans, but it's not quite right.
The aliens, every alien creature we see in this movie is pretty different from Earth creatures, I guess.
Yeah.
I guess like the little babies
more
or
Earth creature, but they're like, no.
The Thermians themselves, when we see them in human form in their jumpsuits, they actually look more like a 50s or 60s sci-fi alien with the kind of, the kind of slick jumpsuits and, kind of slightly goofy even.
Forbidden Planet.
Yeah, like Forbidden Planet, or even like Plan 9 from Outer Space on the campier side of things.
But Gene Roddenberry liked Forbidden Planet. Like, he clearly was inspired by it.
Oh, I mean, Forbidden Planet is a step above script, special effects, audio, and all of that stuff. And it wanted to say something. But yeah, I think, it's almost impossible not to love the Thermians when you see this. I think everybody likes them. They're kind of childlike, of course. They're naive, but we see them be heroic. Their sincerity is extremely appealing. They're just utterly sincere about everything.
Oh, yeah.
And the actors portraying them have created these visual tics and walks and all that. And I read that they used some of their, I think their improvisation that they did. And it's such a great mixture of things.
Improv is such like a big thing with like comedy now. It seems like that's what everyone talks about.
Oh yeah,
but...
I was somewhere in that documentary. Oh my! To double check, I had to pronounce his name in. I do not Enrico. I do not know how to pronounce that last name. It's very.
But the guy who plays Mathesar, I know who you're talking about.
Apparently,
Colin Tony, I think.
Yeah, he apparently he auditioned. He was like, oh, I have this other silly thing I was thinking of. Like, do it. And they did that and apparently liked it so much they were showing it to other people in their auditions to be like, can you imitate this? Because I think they were like, that's what we're going with.
But they're good at being consistent. Like they all clearly come off as like, okay, you're not from my planet. But they all seem like they're from the same planet. They can be individuals but still feel like they're all part of the same alien species.
Mm-hmm.
Although they did say something that as soon as they would turn around, you were like, I felt bad for the extras who were just like, wait, what do we have to do?
I bet that was all fun stuff to do.
Yeah.
They did a good
Unless
job.
you are
no
like,
no one stood out. There is no one who's like, he's not Thermian, and he's not a Thermian. I mean, like, I watch like Star Trek 4, and I'll be like, why are these Vulcans smiling in the background? Shame on you, Vulcan Extra in 1986.
the Thermians beat them.
Yeah.
But I love Nesmith's enthusiasm, how it continues here when he's just like, no, this isn't the ship. This is a starport for the ship. Would you like to see the ship? And he's just like so happy to have something to like show off to these people. And you get the idea like, oh, that's all this guy wants. He just wants to be like the cool guy who has friends who like him because they think he's cool. And yeah, that's why he wants to be like the lead. He wants to be not just like the captain of a ship, but he wants to be the lead actor in the cast of actors to kind of like lead the rest of the cast on stage. And you see that like throughout the movie when he tries to lean into like that leadership, he becomes, like y'all were saying, like the guy y'all want Shatner to be when he's able to like inspire them, when he's able to like, Fred, you've never missed a mark or missed a line or whatever, or Tommy, yeah, you can drive the ship. They based it on all your movements, everything. He really is doing that thing that a lot of times we hear in like actor interviews when they're just like, oh yeah, like when I'm on the set of Discovery, I look to Sonequa, she's a great leader and stuff like that.
You talked about when he's helping out Laredo in his flying, and he says, yeah, they based it on your movements. He says it the way you help out somebody without, he doesn't want to blow that they're not really, actual, Star Trek crew. And so he's like, they based it on your movements, and he gives him the hint. It's like reminding somebody of their line without repeating it. And so he's like kind of subtly doing a very good thing, and trying to, he's working for the team suddenly.
Yeah.
As someone who's did a lot of theater in my past, I've had to do that for people and had to have that done for me.
Rachel, I feel like you're like that in real life. I feel like you're like always like thoughtful and helpful. You and Dave both. Y'all are both like, I'm always like, man, I would never be like that smart in the moment to think of like, here's like a subtle way I can be more helpful.
Well, that's very, very kind of you to say, Fatheree.
That's very kind, yeah. Maybe that is the theater where I'm just like, let me help this person who's clearly forgot their lie.
But all the ship stuff looked cool when he's struggling to like pilot the ship, and we get like kind of the joke of him like crashing into the side of the base or whatever. But it's still like it looks really realistic and really good. And then when you get like a look at like the entire base built in the asteroid, pretty cool.
And it's fun because it looks so good. And a lot of times when I show people older Star Trek, I have to often be like, some of it hasn't aged well. Just go with the vibe. It's from the 60s. And this, I'm like, no, it looks cool. Like, we're good.
A lot of movies from the late 90s age really well because like they're shot on like very good film, and it looks great on like modern TVs and 4K until you see like a CGI shot, and then it looks very bad. But because this movie uses CGI so intelligently, it doesn't have that issue.
You know what? And I'll be glad. I'm glad that little bug looks CGI because I didn't want to imagine a real bug.
Oh, when poor Alexander Dane has to eat the blood tick when everyone else is like, you see Nesmith has like a steak and baked potato in the mess hall scene. By the way,
the Thermians have kindly provided them with what they expect for their species.
I love Alan Rickman's line reading of Just Like Mother Used to Make.
Yes. He's just resigned to it. By the way, early on, I think one of my favorite moments early on is when they're in the green room is when Nesmith, you see his first bit of, I suppose, leadership when, Dane refuses to go on, and he's like, nothing you can say would make me, walk out there, and he's like, the show must go on. And he's like,
oh, he knows
damn you.
well.
He does, just does a little under his breath, damn you.
Yeah.
It's the first rule of show business, but that's also something that like rings true. It's like, oh yeah, like that. Like a lot of people go around saying, like, yeah, that's the first rule of show business, right? So
yeah, it's Nesmith both being arguably manipulative, but also kind of a bit of a leader.
There's such like a fast pace in like the first half of the movie, isn't it? Because it does have like a pretty long like third act and kind of like drawn out. It takes like Saris like 3 or 4 attempted kills before they finally stop him. But so much happens so quickly in the first half of the movie. It's paced really well. Like,
Yeah,
because it doesn't.
think because you spent so much happens. I feel like you've earned it by the time you're getting to like, and things are gonna slow down a little bit to show off more action.
Because then, like, as soon as they kind of have like the mess hall scene, and they kind of explain to the rest of the Galaxy Quest cast and also like the audience kind of more of the details of Saris, of oh yeah, he survived that attack and now like he's really pissed off, and oh, it turns out we had another captain before you that he actually like tortured to death, and that's how he found out about the Omega-13, and nobody knows what it does because the show didn't get picked up for a 5th season, so the cliffhanger was never concluded.
It's funny, that does not necessarily ring true to me for Star Trek. It does ring true to me for a lot of other shows, especially in the modern era. There's a bunch of shows that only last 2 seasons on Netflix, and you're like, and how does that end? I have no fucking clue.
But it's
actually more relatable now than it was in '99. Like this is more common now.
Yeah.
What it is though is a clever device to allow them to have the fan speculation end up being very key to the finale.
Yeah, exactly.
Even though, it's not quite a Trek trope to be canceled on a cliffhanger. At this point, the movie starts to become essentially... It's almost like watching a few quick Star Trek episodes. Mm-hmm. It's just a question of, can these people now live up to the roles that they understand at this point they are supposed to? But now it's not just like their public reputation or their jobs on the line. It's lives. It's like the galaxy is on the line and they have to live up to it.
And it's very clear that, like, it's not just this ship. I was like, Saris is evil. Like, Saris will continue to hurt people if you let him go.
The clip of him torturing, like, the other alien is pretty disconcerting in the middle of an otherwise pretty family-friendly movie.
When we saw that in the theater, the person who was, like, sitting to the left of me, they were shivering in their seat at, like, the octopus being tortured. They had a really strong reaction to that.
Sometimes when you kind of go more all ages, and also when you have like the high level of sincerity that you're used to accompanying like Disney movies and things like that, when you get these moments of angst or sadness, they can really feel intense because it's just pure raw emotion. So later on, when Saris forces Nesmith to own up to it in front of Mathazar, it's like the most horrible thing. It's just so wrenching.
But you're right, Dave. Like, the reason why that is so effective is that like when a movie can like get you invested emotionally like early on, and like you don't realize it, but like you've already like opened up like your heart and feelings to the movie, and you're like locked in. Now like the movie can like really F with you. Now it can really make you feel
it's true.
No, I think it's like when you have a lot of one emotion, when you do the other, it hits well. Like this, when it's like everything's very sincere, so when something bad happens, you feel it. And I've also felt the opposite when there's shows where it's like everything bad happens. When like one good thing happens, you're like, oh my god, something good happened.
Yeah, that was how Galactica worked sometimes.
I always think the two I think of are like Game of Thrones. Anytime like the first time your like characters reunite, you're like, oh my god, something not horrible happened to these people.
A sort of little clear-cut win, at least for a moment.
Yeah, and then there's a moment in the Handmaid's Tale where like a good thing happened for two characters that I was like, I think I cried because I was just like, I was just so used to the show being so depressing. God, that shot is cool.
When Saris makes his second attempt at negotiations with the Protector, but they kind of spoof the Wrath of Khan, where it's similar to the prefix code scene,
right?
But here DeMarco didn't know what he was trying to signal to her, so instead
I agree, we're dead.
Yeah, instead like Saris hears him say like, okay, if this guy's as ugly as he is stupid.
Right, he gives his secret plan, and instead of it being muted, it's a hot mic. And that's both. It's great because it's funny, but it's also at this point Saris has kind of shown himself to be a real threat, and you're kind of like, oh shit.
Yeah, now that we know that like he tortures people to death, like we're not stage actors. This is for real.
This scene with like one of his officers' head on a spike.
Oh, yeah.
yeah, he'll kill his own men.
Yeah.
Ceres
Right.
is not like a really like deep villain, but like I'm okay with that. Like I think he's fine for like what this movie needed. We didn't need like a Khan level bad guy running around. He was just there to just cause problems and be scary, and he's great at
Also, because
that.
you have such a big cast, and you don't like in the actual Star Trek movie, you don't necessarily need to build up the supporting cast as much because you have a TV show with them.
Right, we
This,
know
you
these
have
characters.
to build up the entire cast for you to care about them. That you're like, we don't have time to make you kind of care about this villain. He's evil and he kills people. Are you on board? Like,
And he's dripping with malice, too.
And it really reminds me of Shatner and Nimoy when Nesmith didn't understand the show, when he didn't understand, like, you can't hold down the turbo, it'll break the ship, but you're only supposed to use it for quick boosts, because
Yeah.
Nimoy really understood Star Trek. I've seen so many clips of Nimoy at a convention in 1990 or 1984 or 2002, and he's describing a scene from the original series, like perfect, like quoting dialogue either exactly or almost exactly. And I've seen like Shatner at conventions say stuff like, "Oh yeah, one of our great episodes, City on the Edge of the River," and stuff like that. So, it's very much like those personality types here. They didn't have like the rivalry that these two have. That's kind of more of like a Takei or a Duhan thing against Shatner. But that rings true as well. When the moments in here when he's like, like, you stole all my best lines and stuff. Like, Shatner would do that. He would be like, no, I think this line should go to the captain. I think this moment should be about Kirk's reaction. I think it should all be about the main character, Kirk.
You know what's interesting is that every once in a while, he was probably right. That just structuring, that show or a little bit more around a central character, or occasionally an episode at least,
I think the problem is
makes some sense.
Is like, because he was such a jerk in like everything else as well, that like it didn't help. I don't think.
Maybe not. Yeah, I'm just. It depends on kind of whether you're trying to do more ensemble at any given moment or to zero in. Fatheree, one of my favorite scenes is something that you have pulled up a slide of. This is a scene of Tony Shalhoub as Fred Kwan, seemingly stoned, but delivering the most chill version of Scotty's panic as he explains that the reactors can't take it anymore and they're going to blow up everything, just FYI, to the captain.
You said like seemingly stoned. Like I assume he's stoned like throughout the entire movie, except for like in the opening when it shows like his footage from 1982. That's the only time I think he's not supposed to be under the influence of cannabis.
I love that, and I also love when he goes and he's like, "Hey, they have this idea. Let's do that." He's like, "Oh, you were right, guys." So what? Yeah, they don't. I was like, you know, these people, they don't know what they're talking about. Like,
in that scene, by the way, the visual gag of like there's explosions going on in the background with like thermians flying by.
And it looks really good. It looks like almost.
But it's funny too because because of his low key reaction.
I know it wasn't out yet, but it almost kind of looks like in Star Trek 09 when like the ships are getting blown up and there's people being like sucked out into space and stuff like that.
In the documentary, someone who worked on Star Trek 09 was saying like, he's like, yeah, we definitely like thought about Galaxy Quest because it's so good.
But whenever there are like new Star Trek shows or movies, I always hear like these actors talk about like, yeah, everyone tells me I got to watch Galaxy Quest now. So, or they'll say like, oh, I finally watched Galaxy Quest and I love that movie. It's so like relatable. So it's just really fascinating to me. That's part of what I've been most fascinated, I guess, like taking this deeper look at Galaxy Quest is like, well, why do all of these actors love it so much? What are like these like little honest bits that like, these actors are like relating to that I would probably go over my head. There's that moment where the one Thermian who's the big fanboy for Alexander Dane's character, Dr. Lazarus.
I think Qualic, right?
Qualic.
Yeah.
Okay. But him telling him like, oh, I've based my entire life on the philosophies of your people. It's like I'm sure Nimoy lost count of the number of people who came up to him and told him, like, I live my life as though I was a Vulcan.
And I imagine Michael Dorn hit quite a number of people who said that about his presentation.
Dave, I'm so embarrassed to. I've never said this story on the show before.
Okay.
But when I was 16 years old, I wrote a letter to Michael Dorn telling him like how much his performance like inspired my how I live my life, and handed it to him in El Paso, Texas. And like to this day, like I cringe thinking like I hope he never read that, like some of the shit I said in there.
Like you being 16 makes it very sweet to me.
I feel like I have a few things like that in my life, like with letters to comic books and things. But yeah, that's like that, you know. But in a way, that's how important these things. You know, that's why we talk about our entertainment. Why we spend a couple hours a week on Tex-Trek talking about a story, because yeah, these things have meaning. Good stories are important to how humanity functions, and we connect on such a level that you would want to do that. Yeah, maybe it's a little cringe in retrospect, but what does it mean? It meant it changed you. It meant something to you.
Honestly, if you're not a little cringe throughout your life, you're like not really living.
Well, that's what teenage years are for. That's to get all your cringe out in your teenage years. And then, like, you spend your 20s recovering from it.
You spend your 20s finding out the people who are cringe like you, and those are your friends, and they're great.
I like this. This is a good, solid examination of how our geek culture works, and probably almost everybody else too.
Well, let's examine the landing party mission when they go down to the planet. They have to find the replacement beryllium sphere. That's like our dilithium. That's like our warp core, or whatever. Our convenient MacGuffin we need for the story. Perfect for a Star Trek type story. Go down to this planet that has some type of mining facility.
I think this really goes to what your idea where it was like it's like a couple different Star Trek episodes, because this definitely feels like a distinct Star Trek episode. With these horrible child
little gremlin children.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it kind of evokes Trouble with Tribbles. Like a bunch of a bunch. This thing that seems kind of innocent at first, but then when there's a whole bunch of them, it might be a handful. And there's also like elements of Arena, because it's kind of like a Vasquez rock-looking landscape.
I think what's so good is like there's so many good set pieces, but also so like none of like. The jokes aren't sacrificed for the set piece, and the set piece isn't sacrificed for the jokes. Like, they all work very well together.
That's kind of like the best way to, when it's really funny when things can feel like very real and I don't know, something like you can connect to, you can kind of like see yourself existing there, and then like when the joke happens, it's just so much funnier.
This was also a neat thing because it just gave you a new visual environment. Like you said, Fatheree, we get our Vasquez Rocks type homage. You get like an old mining station and some new aliens. So in that sense, it's just a visual pop for the movie as well.
It's kind of like the other Star franchise has the philosophy that I think, or kind of invented the philosophy that a lot of movies adopted after that. But like your action adventure, you kind of need three different set pieces. You need like the desert, the Death Star, and then the rainforest. You got to do like three different things. And then the next one you do like snowy place, swamp, and then cloud place. It's like here we have like normal Earth world, we have the ship, and then we have a away mission planet.
Pretty solid formula, as it turns out.
Yeah, it works well.
And I also love like them playing in the trope where like Guy is convinced he's gonna die on this planet.
Yeah, right. That's Guy Fleegman, aka Sam Rockwell's character, who was really just an extra and is pretty sure he's the red shirt of the bunch.
But that's another thing that I'm not going to say any names, but there's actors who were extras on Star Trek shows, and they do they go to conventions and they try to become part of the fandom and sit in like sign autographs and try to squeeze into the whatever places they can get into and be part of that also. Like that was another thing that like rang true. I'm glad that I see that like when they get like the reboot, they give his character a name and he has some like ridiculous name like Rock or something.
Favorite jokes of this is like we have it's not Sigourney Weaver or Gwen is not worried about herself. She says, "We have to go before one of those things kills Guy."
Oh yeah.
Right. It's like they've been kind of trying to calm him down, like, oh no, you're gonna be okay. And then she's like, he's probably gonna die. We need to go.
Yeah, that's that kind of like realization of like oh y'all were all just saying that just to make me feel better. It's not true. I really am gonna die. Oh no, this is so much even worse than I thought.
God, no, it's one of the joke is the minors not minors, but he's trying to explain
Yeah.
But because I recently had that happen in real life, where I was trying to explain someone the story of how root beer got its name, and it originally was called root tea, and it was changed to root beer because they thought it would like appeal more to the miners around them, and they went, "Why would beer?" I was like, "No, miners as in like mining things, not miners as in children."
The is it this exact sequence where Jason Nesmith he does some Kirk style rolls?
Yeah.
Kind of cheesily, that really aren't helping anything.
When he's fighting the pig lizard, and then after that he fights the rock monster. Well, that was a fun reveal. How like they all start chanting for, what was it, Grognak?
Grignak or something
Grignak,
like
yes.
that. And he's like
Grignak.
They're well, they end up being threatening looking. At first they're childlike, then they've got the fangs, and then you see they've got their big champion, this giant rock man.
The shirt comes off.
He gets his shirt torn dealing with it, even as like the rest of the crew gets away, and so he's kind of being, he's showing a heroic turn here, but they don't know if they can beam him up because when they beamed up the pig thing, it explodes.
It goes upside inside out and explodes.
Yeah,
that was one of the biggest laugh out loud moments for me watching this for the
man.
first time, and I guess it would have been 2000. But I remember I was watching it at my grandma's house, and she asked me like, "What were you laughing so loud about earlier?" I knew like it had to have been this. I was like laughing like so loud, everyone in the house would have heard me. And I was trying to explain it to her. It's like the alien beams up the pig lizard, but it's like turned inside out, and they're all kind of like freaked out by it. But he's talking to the captain on the phone, and he's telling him like, "Oh, the creature beamed up inside out, then it explodes." And then he said, "And it exploded." And she's like, "That's what made you laugh that loud?" And I was like, yeah, it's funnier if you were there.
The performances are what makes the joke. A truly bizarre thing, apparently for this documentary, apparently the way the script was is that he's just shirtless throughout the rest of the movie. And Tim Allen was like, "That's really weird."
Yeah, that would be a bit much. They were right to change that.
But there's not really like a good moment for him to put the shirt back on. So he gets it on like super quick. Like as soon as he gets back in the transporter room, like they just happen to have like a shirt there waiting for him. That's just like the shirt he was wearing earlier.
Joking about that. I guess we beamed it up for him. I don't know, but it's. No, Tim Allen said he's like, I understood why my shirt had to come off for like the Shatner-esque thing. He's like, I did not want. It was like that. I did not want to do the rest of the movie shirtless.
But he got in good shape for like the one shirtless scene. So good on him.
Fun fact from the thing. He had a personal trainer who he is now married to.
Oh well, I guess that one worked out for people.
Yeah. Worked out for him at least.
Yeah,
I guess it worked out for her. She's like, well, I'm gonna marry you, but first I'm gonna like train you to have like the body that I want to get married to first. That might be good motivation. That might be maybe that's what I need, a trainer like that to get me in shape. Maybe. But
by the way, this scene, they managed to rescue him, of course, and it's the last we see, or we think it's probably the last we'll see of Grignak. But he gets a guest appearance a little later on during a climactic scene. That's like just a fantastic sort of payback moment. A good guy win when it happens. We'll get around to it in a second.
But another comment, I guess, on kind of like the fast pace of the movie. Like as soon as they're back from the away mission, it's like Saris is like there, like on the ship. So you just get like enough of like the victory to just kind of like feel like a little bit of reward as an audience member, and then like immediately you're like, oh no, we're back in like dire stakes.
Yeah, and this is like a kind of a classic Trek scene. A capture sequence. Definitely, we're at our lowest ebb. This guy's got, every advantage. And this is the scene where he, forces Tim Allen, when he realizes that Mathazar and the other Thermians think that they're real, that the show was real and all that, and he forces him to tell them the truth and basically utterly crush their spirits.
And this is why I say like the movie didn't need like a deeper villain than Saris. As I was like, no, like he was like nasty enough like as is. Like he's like he was like a good like Megatron. To me, like he's Megatron. Like I don't need like Megatron to be like really deep. I just need him to be like this like big like embodiment of evil that like Optimus Prime has to go out and do battle with. But there's like this like moment in like that dumb like 80s cartoon that like really like cemented like Megatron for me and like my little kid brain just like, man, there's like nothing you can do to like reason with this guy or like negotiate with him. He's just gonna be like whatever's like the most terrible thing he can do to you, that's what he's gonna do. And we see that here with like Saris when he revels in like the victory over his enemy, when he's like, no, I'm gonna devastate this guy's entire life. It's not enough that I killed his entire planet. It's not enough that I've defeated his ship and taken over his ship and I've captured his crew. I'm going to like bring down I'm going to crush his soul and make his hero admit to being a big fraud. The whole reason you built this entire ship, this powerful ship that I am willing to move heaven and earth to come capture, is because this clown over here inspired you, and I'm gonna show you how big of a charlatan he is and just utterly devastate you.
It's when you get to see, I think, Tim Allen, to his credit, does a very good job here.
Yeah.
In how devastated he seems at the moment. What had been a fun thing when when he first met the Thermians, and he was like, oh, this is just neat, this is cool. Now it all just turned serious, and now he sees the real stakes. And when he's like, says like, God, I'm so sorry, he like really conveys it.
Tim Allen's so good in this. Like, they talk about this scene a lot in the documentary. Apparently, this is the one scene Steven Spielberg was on set for.
Oh. It shows. Yeah. Holy hell! It shows. This is like, what else has Tim Allen done that's like this guy? Like, I'm sure he's had like dramatic roles and stuff I've never seen, but I can't imagine anything being better than this.
No, he's so good in this, and even like he has like good, more emotional moments in like something like the Santa Claus, but nothing like this. Like, and in fact, okay, this is a story they tell, that apparently like he got pretty emotional filming this. And then he went, they got it. He was like, I'm kind of like, he's like, I want to go back to my dressing room. I like,
right.
I'm feeling some things. And apparently Alan Rickman was like there and he walked away and he went, oh my God, I think he just experienced acting.
But Tim Allen probably would be the first to admit, like he was a comedian who learned how to act to be on a TV show. He's not like an actor first. So, and to be told that from, like, Alan Rickman to, like, make that kind of, like, insulting joke at your expense, that's actually kind of a compliment.
Yeah.
Sure. Backhanded, but yes.
That Alan Rickman did not make the joke to him. He, like, maybe said it to somebody else. Like,
right.
But I mean, what is Alan Rickman? Alan Rickman ain't gonna be like, oh, that really sucked. Like you can't say that. So it's like, okay, how can I like acknowledge this was good acting, but still kind of be a jerk about it? So I don't know.
Make a little joke.
I like it. I think that was a good. Well played, Mr. Rickman.
And apparently, like he was immediately back to being like goofy with like Steven Spielberg, who was like, wait, what's happening now?
They have a good moment between the two of them, but Nesmith and Dane, or
I'm sorry,
Alan
I just saw Joel's
and
comment
Rickman.
about Alan is a drug smuggler first. Remember? Forgot about that. Tim Allen being.
I didn't know about that. I know that he's. He sounds like he's kind of like a blowhard who like doesn't like paying taxes. I don't know what other annoying things about him are out there, but I know he's he's been up to some stuff.
Tim Allen was, before he was famous, went to jail for being a drug dealer.
That's good stuff. I'm gonna have to look into this.
I didn't. All I knew about Tim Allen was like Home Improvement and the Santa Claus movies, and this. And then he did some movie called like Jungle to Jungle that Dominic Keating is in.
I forgot Dominic Keating is in that. I have seen Jungle to Jungle. It's a very 80s. It's also a very 80s mugshot. He's like got a big mustache. And
nice.
If he was just selling like weed and stuff like that, I'm not going to be too judgy about it. Alan Moore, great writer, sold drugs too.
It was definitely. I forget, it might have been cocaine.
That sounds about 80s, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was trendy. That was a big deal in the 80s.
So, Father, you were talking about this scene, though, where they get to, like, kind of show some old synergy based on their memories of the show.
We've been talking a lot lately about Star Trek Enterprise, Dave, as we just recently went through season 1. People want to check out some of the recent Tex-Trek episodes. We were covering season 1 Enterprise. But one thing that I notice happens a lot is that Archer and Trip, they'll kind of do their kind of, I don't know, their improv deceptions.
Yep.
And we
I love that.
But it is a very, like, I was going to say Shatner Nimoy thing, but a Kirk Spock thing. But you can't help but think of it as like these two scene partners, these two actors on stage, you know, acting out this little, like, two-person performance. But that's what we get with, like, the two of them, and they kind of, like, vent some of, like, their real frustration and, like, yell at each other and play fight, because, you know, like, they're actors, they know the choreography, and they actually have, like, a little bit of combat skill and can defeat their captives and get the rest of the crew free. But I like that because, you know, it's one of those things that we see in Star Trek frequently, and it worked well here in the movie.
It's when they start getting back their agency after having had it entirely robbed by Saris. And you know,
it goes back and forth, I guess, a few times throughout this third act.
Yeah, we get some exciting ups and downs.
I was mentioning the Super Bowl earlier, unless I cut that out for the podcast people. But if they're wondering what I'm talking about, go watch the YouTube stream. Hit subscribe while you're there, podcast people. But yeah, it is kind of like a football game where, like, both teams are, like, scoring a lot because, like, the ball is going, like, back and forth. Because every time they seem to, like, get like a 1-up, and you think, like, Saris is finally done for. He's still standing. That's a very fun, satisfying moment when they throw his minions out into space, and then later you see the bodies like they're like bugs on the windshield on his ship.
Yeah.
It's fitting that he kind of looks like a cockroach because he is hard to kill. Like.
Yeah, that's another good point. I kind of thought of him as more like a reptile man than an insect man, but I guess he is more insect. He's got, like, antennae and, like,
there's his reptile there.
It looks like insect chitin on his armor is kind of like, it's almost like his own bug armor skin.
Their design kind of inspires some of, like, the Xindi in season 4 of Enterprise. Speaking of Enterprise.
Somebody that was mentioned in the comments, I noticed. This builds to what I think is one of the film's great dramatic moments, is, of course, when Quellic dies, essentially, and inspires Dane to have to embody his character as Quellic is dying and take on the actual, you know, kind of warrior ethos for a moment and really honor the person who died believing in him. Really a heart-wrenching scene.
It's like... he plays, both Alan Rickman and the actor playing Quellic play it so well that it's heartbreaking. And when he delivers, you know... Dane delivers the Grabthar's hammer line. He says it, like, with total conviction. It's like he's not even acting in the moment. It's like
the first time he said it and, like, really meant it. Like, since he was, like, on the show, like, he's been he's been half-assing it for so many years. But here's the first time he's like no, like, I truly believe these words. Like, I will avenge you.
I know I was, like, watching this in the theater and, you know, having a great time. I was not expecting to have, like, tears in my eyes, you know, during the big final action sequence. And that's when I was this movie, this is something kind of special.
It's like, you spend so much time with the characters, they're like, oh, they earned this. Like, between, like, both of them, you're like,
and it's a brave thing to do.
Yeah,
it's bold to try to do something, like, serious with, like, these, like, goofy aliens that make all, like, these goofy noises and walk around looking all stupid, and then, like, you want to be all sad when one of them dies. That's a tricky thing to pull off, and it's kind of a risky thing to attempt.
I think you know, when you think about how they constructed it so that they ratchet up the kind of drama when Saris captures them and, you know, forces the confession from Nesmith, and you're like, oh, like, I'm really being bounced around here. We're hitting some peaks of seriousness, and you kind of never know when there's going to be another serious moment. So there's some real suspense at the end. You know, like, oh, they're not all going to probably die, but at this point you're like, oh, but people could die. So
and there's so much to what like the main core of the story, of the themes of the story are, but about like fandom and about like performance and like that connection. And it's like the greatest thing like a performer can give a fan or like an enthusiast is just like impactful, like that moment of impact. And I mean, like what the hell could encapsulate that more than what they came up with here?
I think like it shows like how in real life, like how much like different art can mean to like someone, even if it's like it's not just a silly TV show. It's like a piece of art that like affected a person.
Because it's the fans' reaction. It is. Remind me his name.
Justin Long's character, or Mathesar.
Quillick.
Oh no, sorry, Quillick. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Quillick.
The Thermians are also fans of the show. They just don't quite realize.
It's
right.
It's Quillick. Yeah, that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about like the fan and the performer and like the impact. But with Quillick here, it's like his reaction, like when he finally got to hear like the lines in person, like it would be like if like Leonard Nimoy like held me before I died and said like live long and prosper or something like it feels like his reaction to that is just like, oh my god, I don't care that I'm literally bleeding to death this very second. This is the coolest thing that's like ever happened to me. It's like I understand why, as bizarre as that sounds, I understand why this guy would feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
In a much less dramatic way, I felt this way when it's like a piece of like usually musicals that I know well, but the first time I actually got to see it live, like in a theater, it like hits me differently. Like The Sound of Music in particular. Like there was years and years ago, they do a play in Circle Park every year. It's like free, and they did The Sound of Music, and there was like two things that really hit me, and it was like the live. They had her start up. It's on the hill, and they had her start singing like The Sound of Music from the hill behind you. So then she like came through the audience.
Oh. How cool.
And then they had Captain Von Trapp, and the part where he sings Edelweiss Alone, they had him sing it in German.
Mm-hmm.
And it, like, I was just like, oh my god, like, hearing this and, like, having this moment in person is, like, affecting me so much.
Yeah, again, there's a reason why we talk about these things, and, it's not because these things are just throwaway fantasies. Fatheree, as slides were going by, I saw, of course, they transport in the Big Rock Man too. Garignac comes in and just wrecks some of the bad guys in the hangar, I think.
I feel a little big bad for the Rock Man also floating in space. I don't know that he deserves that.
That is one of my favorite moments, though, is when they do beam them up. When Fred is like, "Oh, I have a fun idea," and the way that
mischief
of that, like their digitizer or whatever they call it, like it's like the effect is cool to make it different from the transporter, which is kind of like slow. It makes like this sound that kind of like calmly transitions you in as you beam in. This thing's just kind of like it's like Thor and with like his lightning and the Bifrost and like the MCU movies. You're just kind of like zapped in instantly, and there's this like lightning and it's like this big sudden thing. But when you have like Garignac show up and all those guys just kind of look up, one of them smoking a cigar, and they're just like, oh yeah, that's kind of like the same moment that DeMarco and Nesmith have when they see the chompers. It's just like, well, screw that, kind of reaction. But they do all kind of get like their big moment in the third act. Guy is like, okay, I'll accept my role as the red shirt, and then Fred is like, maybe you don't have to be the red shirt who dies. Maybe you can be the plucky comedic relief. I think that was a word that we were saying a lot in '99 because of George Lucas's creation of Jar Jar Binks. But you see, I guess Tommy Weber like doesn't do too much. He just kind of has to watch his footage of like piloting the ship. But
I love it. He says his catchphrase, and it's not as serious as by Grab Thar's Hammer, but he's like, what is it? Pedal to the metal, Captain.
Yeah.
And it's like he's actually feeling it, and it's like it is a cool scene.
And it's very
it's
like
speaking of just like random, like how good the casting is, that his random younger self is Corbin Bleu. It's like it's very funny to me. And I know Corbin Bleu, most famous probably for he is in the High School Musical movies, but he has a pretty good like stage career now. And so
nice.
it's just like, baby Corbin Bleu, what are you doing here? Like,
by the way, the Rockman, I feel like, were they to ever do one of those occasionally talked about Galaxy Quest spin-offs thing, I think that they could show that they, like some Thermians picked up the Rockman in space, and like he's kind of an ally now, and maybe you would occasionally even see him on the ship. Like, I think you could have a little fun with it.
That would be fun.
I think that one of the reasons why the movie is such like a love letter to fans, why we think of it that way, is because the fans are part of that third act teamwork element.
Oh, yeah.
When everyone like has like their moment and their chance to shine, the fans do as well. When Brandon, where they have to call into Brandon for tech support, basically. It's like, okay, like none of us actors actually know the layout of the ship, but you know who does? The nerds who watch the shit, so let's call them.
It's so good because I think, we kind of know tropes and story arcs, and I was like, I bet, maybe, probably in the back of my head, I was thinking, Jason Nesmith will go and apologize to him in the end, and, maybe give him a pass to a convention, or say, we want you to come out to the set, or something like that. But I could not have expected that the fans would be integral to saving their asses. And that's so cool.
When I watched the documentary, apparently there was some studio note that they were like, maybe we should cut that subplot, and the director was like, no, that's the heart of the movie.
Oh, wow. That's wild.
And he was like, that's so important that it's like, I guess, no, the fans help save them.
The other funny thing is that the big death scene that we were just talking about, I guess when they were shooting that, one of the producers was on set like, we need to hurry up and move on, and they were like, no, we're gonna like take our time with this moment here. And then Alan Rickman was actually like yelling at the line producer, like get off the set now, we're trying to work here.
Wow.
But the idea of like, like all of these nerds are like on the internet and on their computers talking to each other, and they have kind of like this hive mind, it is kind of like the Borg collective. But that was such a more of a thing now than it was back then. But that thing, the Star Trek fandom was a bit ahead of the curve on just like connecting online through more primitive ways in 1999 before social media was as big as it is now. But that was certainly in existence then, and I'm sure so many more people watching this movie now can relate to the fandom depicted here.
Oh yeah, I totally relate to that. As like for like different fandoms, it would be funny. Like for multiple friend groups I'm in, if someone like has like a Star Trek thing will come up, people will just like text me or like message me and be like, "Hey, explain this to me real quick." I believe one of my favorites was like once a friend was watching something Star Trek adjacent, and someone was talking about the Q, and he went, "Is Q his name or his species?" And I believe my answer was yes.
Yeah, that's accurate. I think when you see Brandon's room and how he's like in the middle like building a model. I mean, that was when this movie came out. I was a teenager who built like model starships. It was it for sure like I don't know. I felt it was like a very fair depiction of a Trekkie.
Yeah, and a little bit of laughing at, but mostly in a kind of, not a truly cruel way. Kind of a.
And like the jokes are like the joke where he has to go take the trash out is like, it's just a good joke. Like it's not at his expense.
I'm sorry, but I've been there.
Yeah. And it's like,
and honestly, anybody who's even been playing like a video game and their mom made them go take out the trash and you had to pause your game or whatever.
Which is more of a today thing than it would have been then. But yeah, like online gaming, I think is for sure more of a thing now.
Yeah.
So. I like definitely had things where I'd be like, or I'd be like watching something, I'd be so into it, you need to go do this. But even like fairly in the last couple of years. My brother got married a couple years ago, and there was like I think season 2 of Picard was coming out with this, and I kept trying to like have a moment during that weekend to just go watch the new episode, and it just kept not happening.
Why
and
would they do this
like
to us?
28, like.
Yeah,
I wasn't trying to do it during the actual wedding, for the record. It was like the weekend or surrounding it, family members kept showing up at my house.
Listen, I won't judge you if it was during the wedding.
Well, honestly, that would have been impossible. They got married at a ranch that with no internet, so.
Boo. So we're getting to the big finale and the little secret finale, too. There's kind of two, really.
The secret finale.
The secret finale is when they crash at the convention.
Post-credit scene that I've never seen.
No, it's when Saris is still alive at the convention at the very end. But like first they have to like use the Omega-13.
Well, even before that, like they bomb his ship with the mines, and then he beamed over, so that they gotta.
I would say another really, I think, good moment is after the Crushers with the thing doesn't work, so they think they're gonna die, and then it just doesn't go off because the detonation never happens on the TV show. Why would they build that in?
Right. It always stops at one.
Yeah, such a good like the trope because there were so many countdown to the destruction of the ship, and it never happens.
That's the one joke that kind of bugs me because that's that's just more like a general TV trope of like the clock always stops at 1. It's like that's not really like I don't know. I feel like Star Trek is like better than that, than to have like the clock always stopping like exactly 1 second.
I would say for this, it is fair for them to make jokes that are just TV shows in general because at no point do
they don't do it too much. They don't really abuse it. So it was, but it's a funny enough joke that like, oh, it didn't even matter that he was gone taking the trash out. But
sometimes a good joke can get by on that.
Yeah.
But
even while it's so Star Trek focused in a lot of ways, at no point does this movie say like this is Star Trek. They just say this is a sci-fi TV show.
Right.
Yeah, but it's clearly more homaging Star Trek than anything. It's like
Star Wars.
95% Star Trek and then like 5% like other media.
Yeah, I would say other media does it so much that I'm like, I'll allow it. Like.
And certainly there's countdowns in Star Trek, so it's in the ballpark.
Yeah.
The thing where they're dragging the mines, though, that is very much, that's Kirk, in the Mutara Nebula, or, various, prefix code Kirk. That's a classic Trek moment right there.
It was more of the actors. It was more of like, hey, it doesn't take a great actor to recognize a bad actor. Like, I think that I think that in this game of chicken, you'll blink first. He's like, oh, do you realize you're going up against a general?
Yeah. It's a great scene. This movie actually has a lot of, like, it's very crowd pleasy in what I would say is the best way. I don't feel like it's goofy pandering, just that they give you, like, all of these really satisfying, kind of finales at the end. And Saris's end is a good one. He gets his ass blown to pieces, and he deserves it.
Well, he gets disintegrated on the planet.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah.
But before that, I think
it back to Earth with them, which is like impressive.
I think the moment of him actually getting his just desserts though is when Mathazar beats him up with his cane or walking stick or whatever, because he had been tortured by him. And Mathazar is such like he's so pure.
Right.
Like, you can't imagine him, like, actually being, like, hateful against, like, Saris, but it's still satisfying as all hell just, like, watch him just, like, whack the shit out of Saris and knock him out. But
no. Like...
The reveal of the Omega-13 is, like, this time travel device, but you can only use it one time and only for 13 seconds, so it's just good enough to redeem one single mistake. It's like, oh, that's a neat sci-fi idea. That's worthy of having like this big reveal at the very end of the movie.
They had like worked it in really well earlier, where it became clear like it's probably gonna come back, but not in a super obvious way.
Yeah,
like it felt really natural when like they asked like the fan, "Hey, what do you think this is?"
Right, he gets into like fan spec stuff.
Yeah.
But yeah, and thematically it fits is because like what is this movie about but like Jason Nesmith trying to correct his own mistakes, recognizing that he's a flawed person and trying to be better. And so the fact that this device is something to do exactly that, in a very action way at the very end, but it fits the theme.
Mm-hmm. And it allows them to do that. It allows for like a really dark moment where like you see most of them die.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, but I love that. I love like time travel. I just love
I
like
that trope.
I love that moment in a movie where you can just be like, "Oh my god, I have no idea what the hell is going on. My entire world is turned upside down. What's going to happen next?" It's so hard to get that. Like it's like so many movies are like, I don't know, just like comfortable and you can just kind of predict where they go. So I
think when a movie like when it hasn't had a lot of those moments, so when it does happen, you're like, "Whoa, what?"
Yeah.
That's allowed to happen in this. It's funny because the other big way I could think of is like the last thing in the Twilight movie where they do a flash that does not happen in the book and make you think all the characters die, and it is insane.
Right. I know of this, even though I have not seen the movie. I've seen a glimpse of that.
I like the idea of doing that though. I like that a lot.
Firefly, I think, I won't even say after a notable character death. I'm sorry, in Serenity, the movie that ended Firefly, has a notable character death, and then what looks like it may be several more coming up, and you're like, oh shit, they're really going to do it.
Spoilers, they all die.
and things play out interestingly, but, at that point, every fan's heart was like in their throat because you don't know, so...
Yeah.
And so then we finally the Protector crashes back at the convention on Earth, somehow not killing people, but it looks cool.
Yeah, I mean, there's gonna be a lot of like insurance claims, like it knocked out a bunch of cars in the parking lot and half of a building, but
actually. No wonder he thought of Marty like, this is a very, like, Back to the Future shot of it going over Justin Long's head.
It's almost like I kind of don't want there to ever be a sequel to this, because I don't want to deal with, like, them explaining, like, what do we do with, like, this big spaceship that crashed here? But it is so cool. It's just, like, someone who, like, goes to conventions and stuff. Like, imagine if you were at a convention and, like, all the actors, like, showed up late, but then when they did arrive, like, they crashed, like, a ship into the building and then, like, came off onto stage and disintegrated an alien in front of all of us. Like, that would be the coolest con I've ever been to ever.
It's great. I like that it exists in this heightened reality where, in reality, in the real world, if that happened, there'd be so much damage and destruction, you'd be like, know that this was something not planned, and everybody would be running in terror. But in the movie's heightened reality, they can think, oh, it's staged.
They do run in terror a little bit. At the beginning, they're all like, what the fuck?
Yes.
And ran.
Yes.
When I was like going over my notes and taking like screenshots of this movie and getting everything ready to do the show last night when I was getting ready for today, for whatever reason, when I saw like the image of like all of them like holding hands on stage and like taking a bow, like I just like erupted and just like started crying, just like sitting here just like looking at it. Like I don't know. I feel like I had like an emotional experience, just like being so, like looking at this movie like so closely, and just like that fandom lifestyle is such like a big part of just like how I live every day. And just I guess as someone who was never like, I was never like in love with this movie. It was never like a movie like that I owned like a physical copy of or just like watched a billion times like I do with like
definitely have a physical copy of it.
Yeah, so many things that I'm a fan of I just like really like obsess over and just like learn every little thing about. And I've always like respected this movie, but I've never had that. But it's like I don't know. It really is just like a work of art. It really is like it so good. It's so ambitious and is able to like pull off its ambitions and yet it doesn't feel like like this big cocky revolutionary thing. It doesn't reinvent the wheel. It's just good.
Yeah. Sometimes there's movies like that. I think that like I'm gonna say The Princess Bride is like one of the most special movies ever invented, I think. But I often hear people kind of talk about this in similar tones, where it's like almost everybody likes it, almost everybody finds it funny and sweet and heartwarming.
Those movies, they're so unique. In that,
Yeah.
and I think part of it is that it feels like it could be way more cynical, and it's not.
Right, but you know what's kind of clever about this? They both have veneers of cynicism. You know, we have Wesley saying, anyone who tells you the world's, what is it, like a fair place is selling you something or whatever. And in this, we have a lot of cynicism about acting and backstabbing among actors early on. And then they move to this much more heartfelt, sincere place by the end. And they take you along with that for that ride.
I think that's why it works. I think that because it acknowledges the cynicism of reality. It doesn't feel like it's like pie in the sky. This is
right.
This is we can have this happy ending and make believe, but it's all imaginary. Like it doesn't. Like I said so many times as we discussed this. Like so much of this movie rings true, and I think that that's like a huge part of it.
It's the end with them all holding hands. It's like, one, they earned it because, like, you're like, oh, because you saw the journey. But it reminds me of, like, when you see the Star Trek cast, particularly the TNG cast together, you're like, oh, they all really like each other.
Well, that sort of leads into the finale here. But I want to say one more thing. When they're holding hands, of course, Nesmith is initially, he and, like, maybe Gwyn are up there, but he calls the rest of the crew up. It's super important. He's got to be the one for thematically and for the story to really have resonance. He calls them up there to stand as his equal in that moment.
It reminds me, I always, every time, because I was involved in theater, I always, like, I love seeing the bows.
Yeah.
And it reminds me of the moment when, like, they all hold hands at the end, and they also, in theater, they, like, also will, like, motion to, like, the conductor and the person doing the lights to, like... that's why when they're holding their hands up, that's what they're doing. They're, like, acknowledging the, like, behind-the-scenes people.
I did not know that. That's cool.
And it's... I don't know. It's always, like, a really sweet moment, and I like that it acknowledges that, like, art in general, especially movies and TV and theater, are, like, it's a group effort. It's not just, like, one person doing it.
Yeah. And you could say that's a big part of the theme of this movie, and even like you need the audience too. You're not really putting on a show unless someone's watching it.
Definitely.
So,
their final bit is that they get what would be kind of their TNG or whatever.
Yeah, the
their
journey
new
continues.
iteration.
Yeah.
Galaxy
Yes.
Quest, the journey continues. Yeah.
Another, in its way, this is a little bit like Lord of the Rings. There's like several different endings. Ceres is defeated a couple times. They take the bow. They get the new show, and they're all satisfying. They're all good.
Yeah. And instead of being over 3 hours, it's under 2 hours. So it's a much more efficient filmmaking.
Want to see the thing of how they convince the studio that no, you have to have Guy. The random extra, you have to have Guy.
But that makes it more of a Star Trek thing, because then the security officer like came back to life. Yeah. So he kind of becomes like a Tasha Yar type guy.
Yeah. His cheesy, like, kind of finger guns to the audience is so good.
I guess
do we think this is supposed to be the Star Trek trope of someone coming back to life, or the Star Trek trope of just reusing the same actors and hoping no one?
Yeah, they could have just like recast them with a different character. But they both would have been like in security, so it could have been a resurrected dude. But I mentioned a little bit a second ago about like a sequel to this, but there has been a lot over the years. There has been like different times they've talked about either doing it as a movie or as a TV show. I know that there was a comic at one point, and it sounded like they were going to do it at one point in time right before Alan Rickman died. And because no one knew, they didn't know that he was sick.
No, I think Alan Rickman was very private about his health struggles, which is fair.
I listened to an interview with the director Dean Pariseau. That's how I know the T is silent. But he was saying how Alan Rickman had told them, like, it's going to be hard for me to work, but if this is what you're using me for, then yes, I am very excited to do this. Let's do it.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
But then like he died like right after they had that conversation, and he said like the idea that they had needed his character, and that's kind of killed the entire idea. They wouldn't be able to do it without him.
There's like another script in the works, which that was a couple years, so I could see them having to completely rewrite the whole idea because one of the lead actors just being gone.
Yeah.
And like,
but I
and
think that's your story opportunity there. I think like, oh yeah, we did
Yeah,
the
I think-
sequel show and it ran for a long time and everyone loved it. And then like, oh no, our castmate died and now we're like, we don't know what to do.
You know, on one level, Fathery, I think, you know, this is a perfect kind of movie. I don't, you know, like, what could it do but be somewhat less perfect
Yeah.
or even, like, not bad? Like, it could be bad. And that would be a heartbreaker.
That's
I'll be
that's
fine.
the most correct stance.
Yeah.
That's where my allegiances
like,
lies is with that.
It's funny that I'm like, I'm so worried they'd mess it up, but I was like, I still like would love to see it. Even
Right, like I
as
can
someone-
picture a version that works. I can imagine it happening, and it'd be.
And
I'd
a
love
long
it if
shot.
it did.
It's a long
It's a-
shot.
Sure.
Glad they didn't do it right after Alan Rickman like passed away, because I feel like that can be really tricky. But you have to do something like any, and I do not envy this. Like any TV show, especially comedies, where they have to deal with like an actor suddenly passing away is like, oof. It's like it's hard. And so I think
Yeah, but I mean that's life in general.
Yeah.
Like no matter what
Yeah.
job you have, your coworker could up and die and just turn everything upsy turvy.
But I think it's been long enough where you could still like do a nice tribute, but it won't be like as raw, which would be nice.
Yeah. If somebody, like, if they had some quality people working on it, I would probably get enthused for it, even knowing that
You
it
know.
probably couldn't live up.
I mean, I liked this. So I would let if Dean Paraso wanted to do it, but he did Bill and Ted Face the Music. So however you feel about like if you think Bill and Ted 3 is a worthy sequel, then I guess like
I think it's fun.
then that's approval
I
for
would-
Galaxy Quest 2.
Funny, when
if
I was
not,
looking
then...
up like what else he had worked on, or as he did the Monk pilot, and I was like, oh, he must really get along with Tony Shalhoub.
I think I want it to be like if they did it. I want it to be a show where they can do different plots and things like that. But you know, not like a show that runs forever. Just 2-3 seasons or something.
If they
like
do
that.
it as a show, I'm
Yeah.
less likely to watch it. So I'd rather it be a movie because I.
Why would you be less likely to watch it?
Just I don't watch as many TV.
The
shows.
time commitment and all that. No,
Yeah.
okay. That's fair.
And
Well,
hey,
right
if you're
on.
not- if it's like if the show comes out when there's no Star Trek coming out, you could cover it.
Yeah. If we run out of old Star Trek, but speaking of which, next week we won't have any new Star Trek. Discovery and Prodigy won't be here just yet. However, Dave and I will be talking to Doug Drexler, Oscar Award winner Doug Drexler. He's worked in a lot of Star Trek going all the way back to, well, even before TNG. He did like some fan stuff in the 70s. He was out there, he was working before they were paying him to work in Star Trek. But yeah, we're going to
That's what they like best.
Yeah, I'm sure it is. But well, he didn't design the Enterprise for free for Star Trek Enterprise. But we'll talk to him about that, designing the NX-01. He's really involved with
Good
the
for him. Get
foundations
some
of that
money.
show. But yeah, he's very involved with the franchise. He glued Michael Dorn's Klingon makeup onto his face and on TNG. He worked in DS9 and he did a lot of stuff in Star Trek Picard season 3 last year. So it should be a lot of fun.
Yeah,
so
that's a big thing. I'm very excited.
Yeah, so please come check that out. We will be live Friday at 7 p.m. And like I mentioned before, we'll have coverage of new Star Trek when it does return later in the year. We'll bring back the Thursday first reactions with Rachel for the new Discovery episode starting
Yeah.
April 4th. It's First Contact Eve.
Oh yeah.
So
That's I want to start celebrating
thing.
that.
yeah, so we'll have
Let's give First Contact gifts on First Contact Eve.
We'll bust out the
I,
tequila and First Contact Day salmon.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah,
very
no.
fitting.
Yeah.
But judging by what happens in the movie First Contact, I believe that is him getting drunk and running away. Like,
Yeah, we'll all get drunk and run away. Until then, as always, live long and prosper, y'all.
Listen to the Tex-Trek podcast through Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, or at tex-trek.com. Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/tex-trek. And follow Fatheree on Twitter at TXTrek. Please support us by liking our videos and subscribing to our channel on YouTube. Thank you and take care.